The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So good morning. We're here at day 3 of looking at some of the jewels from the Shobogenzo. In one place, one way, the analogy of jewels breaks down because they're all connected to each other. Maybe it's more like a piece of jewelry, a crown. So today's talk is going to blend in to tomorrow's and Friday's because it's actually difficult to kind of draw the line. Today I want to talk about the 3 pure precepts, and specifically about the third one, do good for others. And then that will naturally flow into daily life practice, every minute meditation, and then the final day on living Buddha nature. And we kind of pull it all together. The 3 pure precepts: cease from evil, do only good, do good for others. That set is taken from the Avatamsaka scripture. It's often considered to be the embodiment of the Bodhisattva precepts, from which come the 10. However, Dogen is not going to let us off so easy. The third one, do good for others, sometimes it's translated as benefit sentient beings. Dogen includes that very clearly in his Jukai ceremony, which is in another chapter in the Shobogenzo. However, in another discourse that is specifically about the 3 pure precepts, he uses the old form, which is cease from evil, do only good, purify your heart. Isn't this inconsistent? Our rational, analytical mind will say. Perhaps. But again, one of the things that meditation can do for us is help us look, see, be beyond opposites or contradicting truths. Reverend Master Ji used to talk about the kaleidoscopic mind, many views. I used to think in my youth that all the problems we have in the world is due to Christianity. Dividing up everything up into good and bad and heaven and hell and right and wrong and true and false. But as I've matured, I've seen that this is actually just a human problem. This isn't specific to any one religion, culture, way of life. We may have it particularly heavy in this culture, but it must have been there in Dogen's time too. Otherwise, why did he address it? Why was he trying to help people get beyond the opposites? I want to talk some about what's conventionally called Hinayana and Mahayana. We mentioned this the other day. In talking about it, I will give you the teaching that's passed on through Dogen. This comes from Makusa, Ananda, Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Bodhidharma, Daikaneno, Tozan. That's where the To in Soto comes from. On to Dogen. This is what we hold to be, for us, the true way, the true teachings. And at the risk of sounding like I'm harping on it, I want to just emphasize that, again, all roads lead to the goal. Walk the one that's best for you. The Dharma is like a great tree. There's the trunk of Shakyamuni's Buddha's teaching, and then it branches out to multiple branches, trees, twigs, flowers, fruit. It's all part of the Dharma. Find what works for you and make that commitment and go. We have some visiting monks here and also some people who are newer to our practice. And the last thing I want to do is insult them or disparage what they may have been taught by their teacher, by their master. Find the way that works for you and go. When Dogen uses the word Hinayana, as I said earlier, he's not talking about contemporary Theravadan practice. That didn't exist at that time, and certainly not in Japan. He's talking about a narrow-minded view of practice, a narrow-minded view in which we may be interested in liberating ourselves, but we don't take that next step and benefit others and help others. You know, I know Theravadan monks. We train, have friends that are Theravadan monks. They're wonderful. They're compassionate. We get together like milk and water. But the practice can be different. I'll step out on a limb. It is different. But it all comes to the same place. It all comes from the same place. And that's why Dogen harps on one vehicle. And when he uses the term Mahayana, he means the whole vehicle. It's greater in that it contains everything. In Hinayana, it started out as a derogatory term. It's considered to be the small vehicle. Reverend Master Hubert translates it as the lesser course, as in both in a course in a school, but also in a course in a way that one practices. Like, I need to find a straight course to the grocery store. Another place where this seeming inconsistency pops up in the Shobogenzo, in Dogen's writings. He takes traditional, I'm going to call it other yana, just for lack of a better word. He takes traditional other yana teachings and, at the risk of sounding disrespectful, put a different spin on it. Okay, he takes it a step further. And that's what, traditionally many people feel is what Mahayana is. It's a development from the original teachings. In China, they didn't know any better. They thought all the teachings came from the historical Buddha. We know better now, but it doesn't cut into their truth, because they're still based in people's practice, they're still based in people's experience of what is real, what is true. An example of this is a discourse on the 37 steps to enlightenment, or Dogen translates, Reverend Master Hubert translates it differently, I think. But anyway, the 37 steps. Oh, that's very traditional, Theravadan teaching. I've got a book on it by a contemporary Theravadan master. It's wonderful. But Dogen is going to look at those 37 steps in the light of Zazen, in the light of serene reflection, meditation. And then he blows all the concepts out of the water in a discourse on the Arhat. Conventionally, it's said that there's the Arhat ideal on one side and the Bodhisattva ideal on the other. Dogen won't let you get away with that. He teaches the union, the combination of wisdom and compassion. And it's no set thing, it's always changing. And that's the nature of truth, it's flowing. But we know it. We know it in our hearts. We take refuge in the three treasures and move. We go on. We carry on. No matter how difficult, no matter how disappointing, we just keep on going. Dogen doesn't let us throw away the Arhat ideal. The Arhat ideal is the embodiment of wisdom. As the Bodhisattva ideal can be seen as the embodiment of compassion. And we need both. And that's what makes for Buddhahood. Wisdom without compassion is dry, cold, intellectual. Compassion without wisdom is sentimentality, mushy, or doing good, becoming a do-gooder. Doing good without actually thinking about the consequences. So we combine wisdom and compassion in our following of the third pure precept, do good for others, benefit sentient beings, purify your heart. We don't stop purifying our hearts when we benefit beings. And we don't put wisdom aside in order to benefit others. And again, that those two, it's a set of opposites that we're going to have to keep letting go of. The wisdom grows naturally from meditation, from serene reflection, meditation. The compassion we have to put more effort into. If you look at Reverend Master Jiu's Zen's Eternal Life, she talks about that. She talks about meditation, then she talks about compassion and practicing that. Compassion is considered the way in Zen, Chan, meditation tradition. Wisdom arises naturally through practice. This is wisdom, this is prajna. Compassion, karuna. Well, how do we combine those two? Well, we practice this way of getting beyond the opposites. And getting beyond the opposites is not a compromise. Reverend Master Jiu called it a third position. It's not a compromise. And it's not rejecting either end of a set of opposites, whether it's good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, Hinayana, Mahayana, etc., etc., etc. Even what we call our meditation, serene reflection. You can't have serenity, you need to have serenity as well as reflection, and vice versa. Dogen is teaching us how to purify our hearts as we benefit sentient beings. And this is what makes us a contemplative tradition. There are other traditions that are equally good, but this is what we do. This is what's been passed down through our line, through Koho Zenji, Reverend Master Jiu. There's a prominent monk in Japan named Monzon, through Koho Zenji, down through Reverend Master Jiu. It's a direct shot. It's a direct line. There are other branches, other flowers, but this is ours. And by practicing in daily life, this is how we learn to combine compassion and wisdom. This is why we train with people who are more experienced with us than us. Whether it's a teacher, a fellow lay trainee, you're at a priory, some way you find a way to practice. Okay? And this is where, the three-tiered circle, the outer circle, on one level it's body, it's what we actually physically do. On another, looked at another way, it's the third part of our practice. It's the every minute meditation. We go from pure meditation to precepts, to every minute meditation, daily life practice. It's the third pure precept. We go from cease from evil, do only good, do good for others, benefit others. This is the widest circle that we have. It's where we connect with the universe. This is where we touch upon what sometimes we consider to be other. And that's another duality that we have to work on letting go of, self and other. We talked some about that the first day. How do you do this? Well, you learn by doing it. We talked yesterday at the discussion about learning to play a piano. You have to practice. You're not going to play a Beethoven sonata the first time you sit down unless you're a Wunderkind, a wonder child, a Mozart. Us ordinary folks, we have to practice. And we try to let go of even the goal of enlightenment. We try to let go of wanting anything. And this is where wisdom comes back into it, circles back around. Dogen talks about the goal of goallessness in Rules for Meditation. How do we let go of our goals? How do we let go of our ideals? How do we let go of our opinions? How do we let go of our agendas? How do we let go of what I want and what I think is best and what I like? This is the human condition. We're attracted to some things, we're averse to other things. Of the three fires, there's greed, there's hate. And third one is delusion, which is how we get this duality all mixed up and base it on something that's not real. It's based on our views. And so practice becomes an effort to practice the first step in the Noble Eightfold Path. It's translated sometimes as right intention, sometimes right faith, more often right view. So as we practice, our understanding grows. We talked in the discussion yesterday about the dimmer switch. Few of us are light switched it. All of a sudden the room's going to be enlightened. For Master Jiyu didn't like the word enlightenment. I can remember at one time we went through the liturgy taking it out and replacing it with realization. Because there's nothing to get. And that ties back directly into we all have the Buddha nature. We all have the whole of the Buddha nature. We work from a place of positivity, a place of purity, a place of the good which is beyond good and evil. This is possible. And it's through training with others that we learn how to do that. Maybe some people can practice it on their own. I did at one point, and I made some serious mistakes. We need other people to train with in some way. Even if it's on Skyping with someone. I think that counts. I'm not sure, but I think that counts. How do we benefit beings as we purify our heart? How do we purify our heart and benefit sentient beings? How do we not get stuck with formal seated meditation like we're doing right now and activity that benefits others, such as working in the kitchen, making the meals for this retreat, stacking firewood so this winter we can feed our wood stoves, working in the library, helping us organize our books so we can find things, find references, find information that becomes useful for Dharma talks. How do we benefit others? Just by sweeping the cloister. Everything we do can be an act of benevolence. Everything we do can be an act of helping others. I think, as I said yesterday, if nothing else, transfer merit to others. When we can do nothing else, we can still do that. The mind of generosity. Reverend Master Jisho talked about this the first night in the orientation. The fourth chapter of the Shishogi is awakening to the mind of the Bodhisattva. Learn how to live selflessly. We talk in Buddhism sometimes about no self, and that's another whole thing we could talk about. It's said to be the hardest thing for Westerners to understand. But we all know what selfishness is. Work on our selfishness, and you'll realize no self. Again, this is part of Dogen's legacy to us. He grew up and trained in a very intellectual form of Buddhism. They studied scriptures all the time. I recently read a diary of the leaders of one of those traditions who went to China. Was always looking for stuff. A new technique, a new method, a new scripture to take back to Japan to improve his tradition, to improve his organization. Dogen grew up with that. That was his first exposure to Buddhism. And he found it lacking. He found it wanting. It didn't satisfy his heart. So one of his very wise teachers said, well, why don't you go trying with Eisai and Myozen, his disciple. They just got back from China and they know this new thing called Zen. Okay? It was Rinzai Zen. Dogen practiced it for 7 years. He learned all the koans and knew all the right answers. And was quite skilled in it. He got as far as his teacher could take him. Something was still lacking. And so he, together with his teacher, went to China to continue the search. His teacher died there. Dogen might have died there. Travel in those days was very risky. But he encountered this tradition we call serene reflection. Sometimes it's translated as silent illumination. Just sitting. Shikantaza. And it's based on our fundamental purity. Our form of the precepts are often called the precepts of Buddha nature. The precepts show us how to be a Buddha. It shows us how we create suffering. And I think that the great legacy from Dogen is he turned these koans into a personal search. He wanted to find the end of suffering. Just like the Buddha. The Buddha went and studied with the best people he could. He had to strike out on his own. He made it a little easier for us by teaching how he did it and what his mistakes were. Dogen does the same thing. He encounters this tradition. He takes it back to Japan. He immediately gets into hot water. This threatens the Buddhist establishment. For a while he just sat in a quiet temple and just was quiet. Then people heard about him and started to gather, and then he had more problems with the Buddhist establishment. So he says, I'm just going to go up in the wilderness and build a temple there and practice. One of his patrons gave him the land, and so he did. We don't even know exactly why he did that. He may have been run out of town. He may have just wanted a place to concentrate on this combination of wisdom and compassion. There was also a civil war going on. Hard to find a quiet place to practice. Dogen points us beyond the opposites. How do you describe that? How do you describe the third position? And the only way to learn that is through meditation. The only way to learn that is through direct meditation, such as you're doing right now, this week. And you learn from others. You listen to the Dharma, whether it's me or Reverend Master Bayon or any other teacher here, or all the various writings we have. You train with others. You train with the Sangha. Often you can learn just from observation. We start from a place of wholeness. I mentioned earlier in the week, it's post-enlightenment Zen. It's what the Buddha practiced after his enlightenment. He continued to sit in meditation. What else did he do? He went out and traveled the roads of India for 45 years. And he had problems. He had a bad back, probably from the ascetic practice he'd done when he was younger. He had problems in his Sangha. There was a group, what were called the group of six, who were always pushing the envelope on the Vinaya. What can we get away with? We're told not to have sex with all sorts of particular beings, human beings, and then they went out and, to be crude, they had sex with animals. And they came back and said, well, you didn't say anything about animals. And then it just continues. Well, you didn't say anything about having sex with corpses. And they just keep pushing this envelope. Imagine, the Buddha's mind. Imagine what this must have felt like for the Buddha. what he knew, what he was trying to teach. And here you have this bunch that keep pushing. We do what the Buddha did. We live from our Buddha nature. I don't know that I can say much more about that, except that we just have to do it. And no one can do it for you. One of those little Zen stories, the disciple goes on a trip with the master. The master says, well, I can do everything for you except for 4 things. And the disciple asks, well, what are they? He says, I can't eat for you. I can't sleep for you. I can't poop for you. And I can't sit for you. Those things you must do for yourself. And likewise, we must do for ourselves. And we take the koan and make it personal. This is Dogen's, what he called the koan of everyday life. Our life is a koan. Our life is a spiritual problem. Work on that. We're not trying to find the correct answer to, does a dog have Buddha nature? Well, why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? What is the answer? Dogen starts the rules for meditation with these deep philosophical questions. Very profound. Why do we train in order to get enlightenment if we're already enlightened? Now he describes the koan, the question that took him to China and back. He asks these so profound questions. And then look at what his answer is. First, you sit in a quiet room. Don't wear tight clothing. He gives us the actual instructions for doing Zazen. Because therein is the answer. And therein is the path as well. He gives us the whole thing right off the bat. And we continually work on wisdom. We continually, as I said, wisdom arises naturally. That's my experience. That's the prajna. That's being able to see without the subject-object dichotomy. To see without self. To see what's directly going on. And then, in that way, then we're much more able to know what might be compassionate to do. And we have to work on compassion. We keep working on these two, and that they blend, they merge. How? I have no idea. The brain scientists will probably come up with several suggestions. They're already trying to do that. Where does compassion result? Where does compassion lie in the brain? It's still an intellectual answer. It doesn't solve our suffering. It is only through practice that we can resolve our suffering. And the wonderful thing about the Buddha, the wonderful thing about Dogen, the wonderful thing about all the Buddhas and ancestors of our tradition and other traditions, they found it. There is a third noble truth. There is nirvana. Buddha nature does exist. It isn't hopeless. And then we go on to the fourth noble truth of, I step onto the path. I have to practice. I said earlier, someone asked someone what the most important thing in our tradition is. And someone responded, practice, practice, practice. That doesn't mean sitting in formal meditation all day long. It doesn't mean just, going to the monastery for a retreat 4 times a year. That can be helpful. But what it's referring to is what I described earlier as getting the fountain flowing, awakening the Buddha-seeking mind. When you awaken the Buddha-seeking mind, you see the suffering around you, if you haven't already. You try to keep the flow going. You try to keep coming back to meditation in whatever activity you're engaging. Again, again, and again. Simple, but not easy. And you have the great fortune to train with people who have proven it true for themselves. This does work. The third noble truth does exist. That's one of the reasons we do ceremonies, is to build our faith, cultivate our faith. And again, it's not faith in an external deity, but faith in the enlightenment of the Buddha. That's who's sitting on the altar, enlightenment. And we bow to that. We practice with that. I'm going to stop there for today. And as I said, this will flow seamlessly. Maybe that's being arrogant, but I think it will flow directly into our next topic, which is every minute meditation. It ties in with some of the other things Dogen says in Doshin, some of those later paragraphs. We'll get to those. Practice, practice, practice. And this is good teaching for me. It's not just for you. Sometimes when you're preparing a Dharma talk, you're surprised at what you learn. But you're also sometimes surprised, oh, I'm not really practicing that. I've got to put my intention right there. I'm not practicing it as well as I might. We're all training together. One Sangha, one vehicle, one reality. Homage to all of the Buddhas in all worlds. Homage to all of the Bodhisattvas in all worlds.